Hi, I'm Jill Brittle, the owner and lead attorney at Jill Brittle Family Law Group in Portland, Oregon. And I'm speaking today with Dr. Lisa Gabardi of Lake Oswego, Oregon. And Dr. Gabardi is a licensed psychologist. She helps individuals and families with their relationships, marriages, and divorces. And today we are talking about communication tips for co-parents. So, Dr. Gabardi, many of my clients recognize that they struggle with communication with their former partner, and they really want to do better for the sake of their children post-separation or post-divorce. So, what suggestions would you offer for things people can keep in mind before having a substantive conversation with a co-parent?
Sure. The most important thing parents can keep in mind before the conversation is they need strategies for managing their emotions so that they can keep conflict low. There's nothing that can set a parent off than their former spouse and now their co-parent. And so having strategies to stay calm and practicing those in advance of having that conversation with the co-parent is super helpful. Just practicing a strategy for slowing things down, pausing, taking some deep breaths can be super helpful. Another strategy in advance is to know your own triggers, know the things that sets you off, and have a plan for how you'll respond to it. So for example, if I know that as soon as my co-parent starts criticizing my parenting, I'm going to get defensive and start raising my voice, I can be prepared for that and try to see it coming, and then use my emotion management skills and consciously and intentionally try to manage the tone of my voice, for example. The other two things I think that are important in advance of meeting and talking with a co-parent, one would be to set your mindset that you're going to stay focused on the kids. So to be child-centered. And that's your mindset, that this is about the kids, that kids will benefit if I keep the conflict between me and the co-parent low. And that, this is about them and not how I feel about the other parent. Related to the mindset piece is also an intention. So the research would show that specifically setting an intention consciously before we act actually helps us behave in the way we want to behave.
Wow.
So if I consciously set the intention that I'm going to stay calm, I'm going to stay focused on my kids and have a productive conversation, I'm more likely to do that.
So deciding who you're going to be before you walk into that meeting.
Exactly.
So I know that in some situations, parents just don't feel safe sharing their feelings, especially with a co-parent. Mm-hmm. So what can you do to help create a feeling of safety so that you can express your concerns?
So structure and boundaries create a container that can help with safety. And so what I mean by that is deciding in advance of a conversation the who, what, where of the conversation. So that creates a structure to how and what we're going to talk about. The who obviously is the kids. The structure of that is we both agree we're only going to talk about the kids. The what is what specifically about the kids. So having a specific agenda adds structure to the conversation. And having a specific where. So if there's real safety and discomfort concerns, meeting in a public place is a great idea because people tend to be on better behavior around other people. And so that might be a helpful solution. And then the last thing that can add safety would be parents could consider having a neutral third party facilitate the conversation. And that might be a therapist, it could be a co-parenting coach that helps moderate the conversation and maintain safety in the environment.
So kind of similar to what you just said about being in a public place with an audience, sometimes people behave better. So certainly having a neutral person with you, taking notes, helping the agenda, that could be really helpful.
Right. If you're not going to do that, parents meeting on their own in a public place also benefit from bringing paper and a pen and taking notes, as you said, Jill, that just the act of doing that makes it more businesslike, like a meeting, and helps people stick to an agenda and kind of formalize it. And that can be a helpful tool as well.
Yeah. So what kind of communication skills can parents learn to use with one another in this context?
The most important one that is the hardest to do is listening. Listening skills are invaluable, and they're also difficult to do. But being a good listener and helping the co-parent feel that you're listening and genuinely taking under consideration what they have to say lowers the conflict level and increases the feeling of respect. And so starting by listening helps dramatically. What goes along with listening is not interrupting, because if you're interrupting, you can't be listening, right? So letting the person complete their thoughts and finish what they have to say. And then if you can offer any acknowledgement or understanding of their perspective, hugely helpful. And then, of course, you know, most of us have heard of the I statements, you know, talking about yourself and trying to avoid you talk, because turning the conversation on the other parent usually will provoke defensiveness. So trying to find a way to say what you want to say by talking about yourself really helps. And then trying to be specific, mentioning specific needs, making specific requests, that so the other parent knows exactly what you're trying to accomplish out of the conversation.
And I imagine that listening for, oh, hey, we're aligned on this issue, you know, identifying and acknowledging something that you both agree to, you could build on that, I would imagine.
Absolutely. Looking for places where you agree builds a sense of collaboration. And if you can start with where you agree, it's more likely you'll come to some solution.
So when parents, though, do have a difference of opinion, how should they go about resolving those differences?
So that's a great segue to what we were just talking about, Jill, because I usually recommend parents back up. The devil's always in the details. So, you know, parents have different ideas about how to solve some parenting issue. And I usually ask parents to back up and talk about what their end goal is. You know, what's the larger goal that they have? And when parents start talking about the larger goal, you know, we want our kids to be healthy if they're talking about bedtime, and we want them to be ultimately good sleepers and well rested. They might disagree about how, but they agree with what the end goal is often, not always, but often. And so starting with what we were just talking about, finding where you agree, and if you can find small places of agreement to start with, it builds that sense of collaboration and success that usually helps other agreements flow after it. So finding some common ground is a good starting place, and then making proposals about solutions to how to resolve the issue, as opposed to devolving into criticizing the other person's idea. Ideally, try to take something from the other parent's idea that you could agree to, and then weave it into some of your own ideas so that you're trying to weave together a win-win solution to the particular issue that meets the long-term goal. The other thing I try to have parents keep in mind when they're disagreeing about how to solve a parenting issue is that the larger issue ideally is for the parents to not have conflict. To the lower conflict is the higher order goal, because we know parents in conflict hurts kids. And so oftentimes the specific solution to bedtime or getting homework done is less important than that the parents aren't in conflict. So, so being willing to give and take on the specific is important to keep the peace, really. And so often what I'll say to parents is, pick your battles, and most of them aren't worth picking.
Which is funny. So it's certainly the thing we tell our kids when they're in conflict with their friends or siblings, pick your battles.
Right. Work it out. Find a way to work it out. Right.
This is great. Thank you so much for these communication tips. We really appreciate your input on that issue. Thanks so much.
My pleasure, Jill. Thank you.